Should we try and have her reconnect, Hannah? What do you think?
Yeah, maybe Regina try to reconnect. We're gonna go through agenda review and Zoom control, so you have time to reconnect before I'll pass it to you.
All right, thank you. I'll try now. Goodbye.
Good luck.
Okay, all right.
Let's give her about a minute, Hannah. Do you mind, just to make sure, just in case?
Okay.
Yeah. Folks, thank you for joining us. We're gonna start in just a moment. We just wanna make sure our community co-host, Regina, is all set. Her video is not working, but it worked 2 days ago, so we don't know. We're gonna give it one more try before we start. Thanks for your patience. The slide is on the screen, how to rename yourself. And if you see your name changing and new letters popping up and you didn't do that, know that my colleague Kim did it. It's again for tracking of the participation, and for the stipend tracking, it's easier for us to know who is present. But keep renaming yourself. And as you're joining, stay on mute.
Join. Okay, the passcode is 978.
Welcome back.
No.
And for those of you who are just joining us, we're going to start in just a moment. We just want to make sure our community co-host is set with the video.
The video still is not working. It says it cannot start the video camera.
Yeah, it is an older computer that I gave her. Yeah, I don't know what could be the problem, but as long as her audio does work, that's the best case scenario.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, we won't get to see your lovely face, but I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
Yes, and we can hear you very well. We can hear you very well, Regina.
Okay.
All right, well, let's get ahead and start. Good evening, everyone. My name is Hannah. First of all, I'm part of the facilitation team from the Institute for Local Government. My colleagues this evening are Kim and Erica, and if you see them waving at you right now, that's Kim and Erica. As always, the ILG team will be here to facilitate the conversation. Our goal is to offer neutral guidance and capture community voices and priorities as you're working to develop emission reduction plan for Stockton. Okay, so what we're doing today, our agenda today, busy agenda, and my colleague Erica will review this agenda for you.
Good evening. So you should see the agenda on your screens today. And as Hannah mentioned, my name is Erica. I am so excited to see you all. Tonight, our main topic is really to continue the process of developing, prioritizing, and then discussing the SERP strategies. But first, we're going to hear from your community co-host, Regina Griffin. She's going to present about pollution concerns and urban greening. And then we're going to hear from Grant Kirkpatrick. He's a fellow in the Stockton City Manager's Office, and he's going to share some insights about the TCC, or Transformative Climate Communities grant work that's happening in Stockton and how we can be connected to that. And then we're going to move on to SERP development. We are definitely gaining momentum on this process, and our goal here is to make sure you feel like you have enough time to really understand the concepts so you can discuss the solutions and make sure you flag any concerns that you have. So tonight, the district's going to spend some time walking you through a spreadsheet that's going to evolve into your SERP. They're going to show you how to review it, answer any questions you have, and make sure you know exactly how to provide your input and your suggestions. The last thing we're going to cover this evening is an air monitoring update, which was requested by the CSC leadership team, of which anyone can join, and we'll talk to you more about that a little bit later. But as you can see, we've got a full agenda, and so many of you may be eager to wrap up our meeting so you can turn on the vice presidential debates. So we will keep moving, and I'm going to turn it back over to my colleagues. And this one time you're going to hear from Kim Danko. She's going to go over some Zoom control reminders in case it's been a little while since you were on a Zoom.
And I was muted, of course. Good evening, everybody. I was just in the process of renaming some of you. It's going to be me and Erica doing so tonight. So we're just going to be putting R or CSC next to your name. That helps us denote who is going to be eligible for stipends. So please go ahead and chat us if you don't know how to do so. We'd be happy to rename for you. Please don't change it. And then, yeah, this is in place of a proper roll call. If you have any questions, please raise your blue hand and we will call on you, or use the chat box. Please remain muted for us. And the chat function is not completely private, so just a reminder that everything that you guys say will be able to be visual to all of us. So just make sure. And then if you're using a separate device for your video and your phone, you can link the two accounts or go ahead and let us know if you don't know how. And then if there are any numbers, let's see, that haven't been assigned, I'm going to call on them now. I think we just have, let's see, I think they're all linked, so I think we're actually all good. You guys are getting the hang of this. So let's see, actually one just popped on last 4 digits, 8478. Can you let me know your name so I can go ahead and denote it in the display?
Hello, this is Gloria.
Oh, great. Thanks so much. Okay, Hannah, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric and Kim. Okay, a couple more housekeeping items before we dive into this meeting tonight. These meetings are open to the public, and public is joining us via Facebook, or you can participate by submitting your comments and questions, emailing the district at ab617@valleyair.org. And Erica, if you can switch to the slide where this public participation information is posted right here. So again, members of the public, thank you for joining. We will address your comments and questions that you're welcome to submit throughout the meeting, at the end of the meeting, during our public comment period. Our Facebook Live will end at 7 p.m. This meeting will also end at 7 p.m., but Carb and the Valley Air District staff are happy to stay on the line for a couple more minutes to answer any questions, any clarifying questions that this committee has. As always, for the past few meetings, we're going to skip the verbal roll call. We are renaming you, you're renaming yourself. Thank you so much. And Kim, just to double check that we got all the participants. Did we get everyone on the phone? Okay, excellent. And as a reminder, our stipend program is up and running and it's active. And for those residents participating in the stipend program, you need to be present for at least 75% of this meeting. Okay, I think it's the record time for the housekeeping items. We're getting better at this 6 months later. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Ryan for his welcome.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I will keep it very brief. We have a jam-packed agenda for you tonight, a lot of great things. This is really what it's all about. So going back to January, we were talking about SERP and this concept of what it is. And, you know, I'm excited for all the work that you've put into this, all the time that you've spent to getting this point where we're actually talking about the measures that we're looking to incorporate to improve the air quality in the Stockton community for the betterment of all the residents and the people that work in that area. So congratulations to all of you. It's not done, obviously, so we can't celebrate yet, but thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, and Regina, our co-host, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for co-hosting, and I know you have several work to address your fellow committee members.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I just have a slide, a PowerPoint concerning pollution in my community and urban greening.
Regina, you still there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay? Yes.
Breaking up just a little.
Okay. How is that? Is that any better?
I think it's better. Okay, Regina, keep talking. It seems like you're proceeding from your welcome to your presentation, which is totally fine. It's our next agenda item.
Oh, okay. Well, I live in the near Van Buskirk, near the golf course, right across from Terry Park. It's an undeveloped park in the city of Stockton. Okay, am I breaking up?
Yeah. So I wonder, and Jonathan, please help me here. I wonder if we want to have Regina connected on the phone, and maybe if we should jump to TCC presentation, Transformative Climate Communities, while we're working with Regina and transferring her to the phone line where her voice is a little more clear.
Regina, are you okay with that?
That would be fine with me, John.
Okay, as long as you're okay with it. Sure, let's do that.
We want to ensure, Regina, that we can hear you very well. So we're gonna jump to the next agenda item, which is Transformative Climate Communities. And behind the scenes, we will work with Regina and make sure she's all set with her audio. Grant, are you here with us right now? Did you already join? I haven't seen you.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Grant, do you mind jumping in and talking about transformative climate communities and the work that the city of Stockton is doing? And Regina, I'll work with you through the chat box to provide instructions how to switch to the phone audio.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, Grant, I'm passing it to you.
Great. Yeah, no, happy to start a little earlier. So I'll go ahead and share my screen so everybody can see the presentation. There we go. Alrighty. Yeah, so hello everybody. My name is Grant Kirkpatrick. I am a fellow in the Stockton City Manager's Office, and since I want to say about October of last year, I started working on the TCC process at the City of Stockton. And it has been quite a ride over the last year. And I know for a lot of our community partners who've been involved in TCC for much longer than a year, and especially those who have lived through the effects of our climate for many, many more years than that, this is certainly an effort long in the making. And it's really exciting to be able to share with all of you that we're finally at the point where we're going to be able to implement some projects and some strategies to start addressing greenhouse gas emissions and a number of other indicators that we're seeking to make a difference on. So before I jump too much into that, there we go. Just want to, kind of go over, what exactly is TCC. So the Transformative Climate Communities Program is a community-led development, and it really supports community-led development and infrastructure projects that achieve major environmental, health, and economic benefits in the most disadvantaged communities. They define disadvantaged communities using the Cal Virus Screen tool that's available at the state. Definitely encourage folks to check that out. It has a lot of different overlays you can look at on the map that show the different demographics that are used to assess disadvantaged communities. It's really a long-term, large-scale, place-based strategy that's quite unique.
Can you speak up a little louder for my interpreter to hear more what you're saying, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So like I say, it's a long-term, large-scale, and place-based investment. So this is sort of the unique aspect of TCC is simply the scale and length of it. You don't often see a grant out there in the market for close to $30 million just for one 5 square mile area to invest in these sort of climate changing projects, these projects that will really make a difference. So TCC's goal in that respect is to try to be as self-contained as possible. So this one investment should be able to fund the projects, it should be able to fund the workforce development needed to enact the projects, it should fund the community engagement needed to keep the community informed and stay consistent with what they asked for in the first place. They try to fund all aspects of what's needed for the transformational change that they try to seek through the grant. And as I just mentioned, the projects have to be implemented within a 5 square mile area. And I'll show a map in a minute here as to how we sort of drew that 5 square mile area for Stockton. And essentially the way the grant is structured, communities have to articulate the vision that they want to implement through a list of strategies. And then there are projects that fall within each of those strategies. And then in addition to that, we had to provide some transformative plans, which speak to those other elements I mentioned, such as workforce development, community engagement, displacement avoidance, so on. And finally, the TCC program also requires a very robust shared governance model. So we enact that through what's called a collaborative stakeholder structure. And basically what that is, it's an agreement between the lead applicant, which is the city, and our 10 external partners that outlines how exactly we're going to make decisions. You know, when do we have to check in? At what point do we need, you know, everybody's approval versus just, you know, this committee's approval? And really tries to outline a model for how we can work together to make sure that these projects, as I said before, stay consistent with what the community has asked for in the first place. So moving on, as I mentioned previously, TCC, you have to really think of it in terms of a predefined list of activities that we're allowed to do, that we had to function within. So the way they organize it is they have strategies, and then within each strategy, there's certain activities you're allowed to do. So TCC has 8 strategies that they outline. You know, I won't waste time reading through all of them. You can see them on the screen. But essentially, they try to address all the different aspects of what's needed to make a transformative change as it relates to climate. And each one of these supports kind of a different pillar, and they all feed into the objectives of the program itself, which I'll touch on in a second. So I'll just wait a second, make sure everybody has a chance to see these strategies. Actually, I guess I will read them because I know we have a few folks on the phone. So the first one's equitable housing and neighborhood development. Then you have land acquisition for affordable housing. You have transit access and mobility, solar installation and energy efficiency, water efficiency, recycling and waste management, urban greening and green infrastructure, and health and well-being. The ones I've highlighted in blue are the ones that are actually being implemented here in Stockton. In other words, that's all the projects we are funding fall within those strategies. So as I mentioned, on top of those strategies, we also had to provide transformative plans that seek to address sort of these much larger, you know, prerequisites that kind of feed into everything. So the reason that, and you'll see here in a second, I kind of show this diagram, the transformative plans are quite unique in that they are supposed to intersect with everything kind of at once. You know, when you think of community engagement, that doesn't really, your strategy for that shouldn't necessarily change just because you're doing, you know, a project over here or a project over there. There should be a robust community engagement effort, you know, at all times to make sure that people are engaged, to make sure people are aware of what's happening, to keep people up to date, to check in with people, to make sure that the progress is satisfactory, you know, so on and so forth. So they kind of set these in their own categories, and and in our application, we had to explain how in basically every facet of our proposal, we were thinking about community engagement. We were thinking about displacement avoidance, workforce development. You know, example workforce development would be, you know, we're installing solar panels. So how are we going to make sure that the people who are hired and trained to go install those solar panels are actually from Stockton and are benefiting from those jobs and can transition from this project to, you know, full-time employment and stay within the city and benefit the city and the local community. So that's just one example of how we had to think about, you know, how these various transformative plans kind of intersect with everything. I will say, of course, the indicator and tracking plan, that's more or less, you know, just performance management. So that doesn't necessarily intersect in the same way, but obviously equally important that we make sure we understand what exactly we're achieving and to what extent we achieved it, and that we actually stayed on track to achieve what we said we were going to. And then finally, the climate adaptation and resiliency plan was essentially just a brief overview of, you know, the greatest risks that were facing our area. We had to explain how we were designing projects to mitigate the risks that we know will take place. So for example, rising heat means that we know that, for example, if one of our projects had to warehouse goods that were sensitive to high heat, you know, how are we making sure that we're, you know, storing them in a cool place where those goods aren't going to perish or something, right? So you have to make sure you're thinking ahead and anticipating the effects of what we know is going to happen from climate change moving forward. This is not the prettiest map of our project area, but is what the state asked of us, which was essentially an overlay of what I talked about previously, which was the CalEnviro screen data, which shows disadvantaged communities, as well as the AB 1550 low-income census tracts, and a number of other things we wanted to try to point out. So the real thing to note here is that gray border is the 5 square mile implementation area that we defined for TCC. So it looks slightly gerrymandered because we quickly found out that 5 square miles is a very small amount of space when you're trying to impact all of South Stockton. You know, the planning area was much larger. So we really had to whittle it down, and we really tried to prioritize, you know, locations based on what our projects were trying to do. So for example, we had one project at the time that was seeking to do some work in schools. So, okay, so that means we have to be mindful, where are the schools? How are we making sure we're including, you know, the largest schools? We want to do urban greening. You want to make sure you got the parks included. What are the major parks, you know, so on and so forth. So that's what really drove rather the decision-making behind all these borders, was what are our projects trying to do, and how do we make sure we include the most critical areas of the downtown area. This is kind of a culmination of everything I just mentioned, and I wanted to provide this to try to give kind of a simpler overview of everything I just talked about, which is this is essentially how the state, this is almost actually copied from the guidelines themselves, of how we were supposed to organize our proposal. So these top 3 kind of grayed out boxes are the overall objectives of the TCC program itself. So, you know, GHG reduction, achieving public health and environmental benefits, and economic opportunity and shared prosperity. We had to come up with a vision for transformation, basically a vision statement that explained very succinctly how we were going to achieve all 3 of those objectives through the strategies we were selecting, being mindful as well of the transformative plans required. So community engagement, workforce, so on. What you see below that, obviously you have your strategies, those correlate to what I mentioned before. So that could be energy efficiency, it could be water efficiency, whatever it is. And then beneath each of those strategies, you had a predetermined list of projects that we were allowed to do. And that's kind of how it all fit in. So really everything we did should flow directly from those 3 objectives all the way down to the projects we're implementing. Of course, overlaid on top of this are our own priorities, right? The community has its own needs and desires, and you know what exactly we decided to do was basically supposed to be achieving 2 things at once. First, what the state needs us to do. Second, what we want to do, because that's what the community has asked of us. So that was kind of the 2 driving forces there. But I think this hopefully provides kind of a clear, you know, summary of everything I just talked about. So that really covers mostly like the structure of the TCC program. So following this, I'm going to talk more about what exactly we did here in Stockton for implementation, how we decided to, you know, kind of pursue this opportunity. So I'll take a pause there. I've been noticing at the top of my screen, it's been flashing a bit. I think maybe some questions have been asked. So I'll pause there and see if anybody has questions, or I don't know if somebody from the area district staff would mind reading a few questions if there are, because I can't seem to pull it up.
Thanks, Grant. We do have a couple questions in the chat box, which I'm happy to read. And meanwhile, your committee members are welcome to raise their hands, and so unmute you. So that's one of the questions from Mary Elizabeth, and it is, will the strategies be implemented in the general plan update? So there's a long-term implementation.
I see what you're saying. I can't say certainly what those strategies are going to be, obviously moving forward for the general plan. I think those strategies broadly speak to, you know, addressing climate change. So I imagine there may be some similar goals in mind, but this is really speaking mostly to the grant opportunity, not necessarily what the city perceives as the main strategies for addressing climate change. So this is really more to do with how we applied for it, less to do with what exactly the city has set as its own priorities and strategies.
Thanks, Grant. And looks like Willie, your hand is up. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Awesome, thank you. I had 2 questions. One, obviously the top row here, GHG reduction, public health, environment, economic and opportunity and shared prosperity. So I'm kind of curious about the weight for each of these criteria. Is it like an even split, 33%, or I'm kind of curious what the criteria is as it relates to these 3. And then second, I'm also interested about the time horizon for each of these. Is it looking more for a short-term benefit? Is it looking for like a 5 to 10 year horizon? What does that look like?
Yeah. So on the first question of weighting, so speaking as to like the application itself, in other words, how we were scored by the state, it didn't really translate directly to these three categories. GHG was an exception to that. It was actually, I believe it was like 30 points out of 200, and the points were awarded purely based on a curve of, whoever had the highest reduction got 100% of the points, and everybody else got a percentage down based on that. And we were happy to set the curve actually on one part of that. We kind of broke it down. So it's hard to, I guess it's hard to answer your question specifically. I think they,
Oh, did we lose Grant? Is it just me?
Not just you.
Okay, all right. Well, technology is just not working with us. Okay, well, let's wait a couple minutes to see if Grant is back. And meanwhile, let's check with Regina to see if she was, to see how her audio is going. Regina, are you on the line? Grant, we'll watch you for just 1 minute. So just let's pause for a second. I'm checking back with Regina. I'm checking with my speakers today. Regina, are you on the line? Can you hear us? Okay, I don't think I cannot hear Regina. Okay, well, we'll circle back to Regina in a moment. Grant, if you want to continue with your answer.
Yes, I'll keep it brief. The weighting didn't really directly correlate necessarily to those categories. We had to kind of show holistically how we addressed them. And to the second question on timeline, we originally applied for a 5-year grant period. However, because we ended up winning a partial award of 10.8 million as opposed to what we applied for, which is 28.2 million, we are now looking at a 2.5-year timeline for implementation. The benefits will continue to be measured a year after that, and I imagine hopefully the benefits will continue for long after that if we achieve what we're hoping to do through these projects.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a couple more questions from the chat box, and I'll take maybe one or more questions, and we'll keep moving forward. Grant, if you don't mind staying on the line and answering questions from the chat box, that would be great. So a question from Margo, my TCC project and our AB 617 projects overlap, and that's maybe, is there an overlap between TCC projects and AB 617 projects?
Yeah, and that'll actually be the last slide I speak to, but I definitely think there are opportunities to make sure that we're being mindful of where TCC is going, where AB 617 is going, and a whole bunch of other, there's the Stockton Diamond Grade Separation Project. There's, a lot of stuff happening around, the city right now around climate. So we'll definitely want to make sure they're coordinated. And I think that's really why I was asked to present about this today, is to make sure that you all are aware of what we are doing in the TCC space to make sure we are coordinating and collaborating.
Thanks. Thank you, Grant. And it looks like someone shared the link to the TCC Transformative Plans Communities project. And I assume on that website, you guys usually post all the updates and project progress, all the information.
Lisa.
Okay. So we'll take the last question from Douglas. And again, Grant, this is a very active community with a lot of questions, and they're very active in the chat box. So if you don't mind, after this question, just scroll into the chat box and see if I missed any questions, okay? And Douglas, please go ahead with your question.
Okay, yes. Regarding to the presentation, I noted that there's a GHG reduction, public health and environment benefit, economical opportunity, and share property. Are those the department titles that transfer for job that go to the vision, like bidding for project for solar?
Yeah, so sorry. Those are really the objectives of the program sort of overall. So like GHG, for example, stands for greenhouse gas reduction. So it's not that necessarily, the projects descend directly from there as much as projects are supposed to show how, let's say we install solar panels. Well, how are we calculating how much greenhouse gas we are reducing by switching to a green source of energy? Just like we also have to show that, by reducing greenhouse gases, that also has a public health benefit, because we know greenhouse gases are tied to, other diseases. So by reducing our
Okay, I think it happened again. The lost grant. Technology this evening. Everyone is using internet, watching those debates online. Overwhelming the system. That's what's happening. Okay, folks, I do want to keep us moving. After Grant comes back, we'll direct the rest of the answers and questions via the chat box. So please keep asking those questions. But it looks like Regina is all good to go and all set. Regina, can you confirm this with me?
Hello.
Yes. Sorry, I'm trying to unmute her audio. And there, I think, is that you, Regina? Did we get you?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. Well, Regina, you see, you're not alone. People are experiencing a lot of technical difficulties today. But again, we're very excited to have Regina as our community co-host. And she prepared in presentation really to share a lot of information with the rest of the committee about pollution sources in your community, the benefits of urban greening, and she will also touch a little bit about urban agriculture ordinance and what it means for this community. And again, because we would like to have plenty of time for our SERB discussion today, we will take 1 or 2 verbal questions for Regina, and Regina kindly agrees to answer the rest of the questions from you, from the committee, in the chat box. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it to Regina.
Okay, thank you so much. I have lived in Stockton for about 7 years now, and I've lived in West Marina area, and now I live near, as I said before, Van Buskirk Golf Course, and across the street from Perry Park, which is really a vacant lot right now. And so I just wanted to get involved with AB 617 so I can do my part.
Regina, I'm going to pause you for just a moment because we have echo going on, and I know we had this echo in practice, and then we figured out the solution how to not to have echo.
Okay.
Hey, Regina, if you could if you want to go on your phone and close out the Zoom app.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, I want to talk about urban greening and pollution sources in my community. Urban greening in South Stockton. Well, in 2012, Stockton filed for bankruptcy and they cut programs to maintain budget spending. Well, one of the programs was the tree maintenance program under Stockton Public Works. But after getting out of bankruptcy, it was a challenge for the city to acquire sustainable funding for tree maintenance and for tree planting in the city. So also South Stockton has been impacted the most because of that. And so that's why we feel it's really important for urban greening in South Stockton. And this is an example of a tree census that I took part in And one side is the Brookside North Stockton, and the other side is South Stockton, and both are near main quarters. But as you can see, there's a lot of difference in the trees, and I found an interesting article on the EPA website concerning barriers and important barriers as a mitigator for pollution. And we find a big difference there in North Stockton and South Stockton. It makes a huge difference in the temperatures in that area, in those areas, and greening would help a lot. And so some of the solutions that we found, one of the solutions that we think would really help here would be community gardens. And Perry Park is a prime example of that. It's a park that is undeveloped, and we'd like to start there. Okay, and some of the benefits to our community could be access to fresh and healthy food. I should say easier access, because right now we're experiencing a food desert situation here in our area. Box track, the closest supermarket is Food for Less, which is way in Carolyn Weston, and it's really inconvenient. But those community gardens could help with that. It could help reduce car travel to grocery stores and increase environmental stewardship and build engagement from the community. I think it's a well-known fact that greener neighborhoods are cooler and they're also a source of pride for residents. And so we want to take that into consideration. This is a photo of my neighborhood, and that red area there is Perry Park, and it's completely desolate. There's nothing there. We'd like to plant trees in that area and just really cool that area down. Right in front of it is San Joaquin River, and we do have some concerns there with the surrounding businesses and farming businesses.
Regina, I'm going to pause it for just another moment. I wonder if you move just a little bit closer to the computer, we can hear you better.
Okay.
I see. Yes, maybe that trick would work. Let's try it.
Let's try it. Okay, and I can try to talk a little louder as well. But as you see, this is what I see every day when I come out of my house. It's Perry Park, and it's empty. And I've spoken with several of our neighbors, and we do have an interest in community gardens being developed in that area. Also, I wanted to mention briefly the surrounding businesses. There is some farming businesses in the area, and we're concerned about breezes and runoff from pesticides and other things. Now that's the Perry Park from Google Maps, and this the city of Stockton 2000 census census there shows it green. It's not green, it's barren, and so these are some of the things that we'd like to put in high priority. That's picture of Perry Park, right outside my front door, and this area could really benefit from the greening. It'll be a positive addition to our community. And a lot of the residents in our area is very interested in the community garden. So I don't think it would be a problem there. Now the city just passed the urban agriculture ordinance. And so we're excited about that. It certainly help us with some of the issues of clean and healthy foods. You know, also, I just wanted to state that, you know, tree planting and greening also provides a great benefit for our pollution, you know, because it does reduce carbon emissions in the air. And so it's, you know, it's really important. And so we're interested. These are some of the, this is the area, this is Perry Park there. And this is the area right across the river from us. And this is what we're concerned about with the chemicals and herbicides and pesticides that may be used in those areas and the runoff. And, you know, so we're concerned about that. So another one of our pollution sources in our community is dumping, illegal dumping. And there's a lot of it. And, you know, we're concerned that someone may start just burning those trash. The city comes out and picks it up, but it happens pretty regularly in our area. And this is right on the other side of Perry Park here. And we'd like to see green boundaries in that area that could protect the residents from the corridor there, that heavy corridor with the trucks coming and going. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I hope you were able to hear me.
Thank you, Regina, so much. Very excellent slides, things that we could not, at the moment here, we could definitely read. And thank you, Jonathan, for helping to put those slides together. And thank you again for bringing this important perspective, why we're here, what this committee is trying to do, how we're trying to reduce pollution, what are some pollution sources, what is the situation with the urban greening. And again, something that you're going to see in a moment, urban greening is one of the top priorities for this committee. The city of Stockton is also working on urban greening as part of the Transformative Climate Communities grant. So yeah. So I wonder, since we're experiencing definitely internet struggle, internet overload today, if committee members are comfortable moving the questions for Regina into the chat box. And Regina will answer those questions for you. And yes, and actually, can we do a collective round of applause with our hands like this for Regina? She worked very hard to prepare this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Regina. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving us along because we have a very important discussion for the remainder of this meeting. We're gonna talk about our SERP draft strategies. So the last meeting, the Air District shared the SERP draft strategies with you. We had a chance to briefly review them, and you were tasked with studying those SERP strategies that this committee proposed over the course of several meetings on your own in the comfort of your own home. We asked you to read those strategies and start prioritizing this strategy by participating in 2 surveys that the Air District sent out. And I was told that most of you did take the survey, so we got a lot of results in. Tonight, we're gonna see how this survey turned out and how can we use your priorities to move into the next phase of SERP development. For this agenda item, the district is gonna share the survey results with you. and then go over the document that you will become very familiar with, and this document will help you to further develop the SERP strategies. Ryan will kick off this agenda item, and Todd will give you a presentation outlining the approach and the approach for the next steps. And then Jamie will show you the tool that the Air District put together for you folks to use. And the spoiler alert, you're gonna have another homework assignment, just because we are moving fast, but at the same time, we're gonna ensure that you have plenty of time to work with the strategies, to review the strategies, to really understand them and to prioritize them. With that, I'm gonna pass it to Ryan.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I know we use the term homework, but based on everybody's support and getting those surveys back in, I think I'm proud to say of this committee, they definitely view these as opportunities to help the community and doing their fair share. So just can't thank you enough for everybody that took the time, really looked at the surveys, what was in there, what opportunities weren't included, and definitely shared some thoughts on additional ones that could be potential measures that we're gonna look to do a little more research on that and bring those back as well. Just want to talk kind of at a high level what we're doing with the surveys. So Jamie and Zong spent considerable amount of time going through the surveys, identifying the measures that the steering committee feels strongly about or mostly strongly supportive of. And what our goal and our intention is to do is to really start putting adding more detail to those measures. So we feel like, based off the survey results, we have, and then obviously Jamie's going to go through it a little bit more, but what we're hoping to get is the support from the committee on many of these measures so that we can start putting together more fully fleshed out descriptions, identify the agencies and organizations that we're going to have to look to partner with. A lot of the legwork basically to develop the SERP, the draft SERP that we're going to present to this committee before taking it to our board for adoption at some point. And so I know we're kind of working under these tight time frames, and I think in an ideal world, we don't do things like surveys. We do it all in the steering committee meetings. We're face to face and we work through these issues, and there's so much creativity and when people are working together that help improve the measures and a lot of that input, there's still going to be that opportunity. And I don't want anybody to get the sense or the feeling that they're not going to have that opportunity, because this is going to be fully, we're going to listen to everybody up until it gets taken to our board at some point. The other piece that I know we'd heard a lot about was the wanting to know dollars, like how much measures may cost. And so what we did was, once we got those survey results, we went back, we talked with some of the agencies that may be party to this, got an idea of roughly how much equipment may be available to fund incentive measures for, and then some of it's based off our own personal experience on what participation rates we see for various types of measures, and putting together some dollars for the steering committee to look at. And what we're looking to do would be then on our next meeting would be to provide this information after this meeting. Everybody has an opportunity to look at the dollar amounts, how much is being put towards these. Hopefully some of the additional incentive measures that we just got, we're going to be able to put some more work and get some more dollar amounts for those. And then in the next meeting, we'll really focus in and trying to put together the incentive measures, with the dollar amounts that are available for the Stockton SERP. And so that is kind of, I know it's a lot of information, and I'm excited and I know the district team, Air District team, is excited to work with all of you on this. and excited to hear the feedback on the presentation that Jamie and Todd are going to give. And I know they'll do a much better job than me. So I'm thankful that they're going to be presenting that information to all of you. And so at this point, unless anybody has any questions about that, I'll turn it over to Jamie. And I see, yes, so we will be able to provide that information. Gloria was asking whether or not we'll be able to provide the information on the surveys, and the answer to that question is yes.
And Ryan, you're turning it over to Todd first.
I am turning it over to Todd first.
No problem. And thank you, Ryan, for that great introduction. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see everyone. Again, my name is Todd DeYoung. I'm the district's Director of Grants and Incentives Programs. And I'm going to do exactly what Ryan said. I'm going to walk you through a process tonight that gets to a lot of the questions that a lot of folks have been asking. You know, what does equipment cost? What do some of these measures cost? You know, how much can we do in each one of these different categories? And I'm going to take you through a slideshow. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background again on the funding and where it's coming from, kind of like what we did last time. But then we're going to dive into potentially how you build a set of SERP incentive strategies. You know, what does that look like? And so I have a presentation here. I'm going to share my screen and get going, and then I'll certainly kind of walk you through the process that we went through to sort of develop these. And again, it's based on our experience, not only with our traditional grants and incentives programs, but our experience in the two other communities that we've been involved with in Fresno and Shafter, and sort of pulling on some of the resources that we've seen there. So just to dive in a little bit, and again, this is a little bit of background because we went over some of this at the last meeting, but just at a very high level, we all remember that, you know, state funding was made available to support air quality improvements in low-income and disadvantaged communities throughout the state, with a heavy focus on the AB 617 communities, such as Stockton. There's $50 million that was currently available in what we call Year 3 funding, which was made available under Assembly Bill 74 as part of the budget. The expenditure of these funds is subject to the Carb Community Air Protection Guidelines. It was a set of guidelines that were developed specifically to spend these funds, these CAP funds, these AB 617 focused funds. And they are really meant to achieve air quality benefits through two main avenues. The first one is through existing state incentive programs. We've got 25 or more years of experience in running state programs. They're very well established. They get emission reductions that are, quantifiable and that, can really stand the test of time. These are programs that have been well established. So funding can be spent through all those, and it's a variety of different measures that you can spend those funds on. But then there's another avenue that was very unique to AB 617. And it's called community identified projects. And that's exactly what we're doing here through this process. What's important to the community? What kind of projects would you like to see? Urban greening, vegetative barriers, all these things they may be outside of traditional incentive programs, but they're really community driven programs. And so there's an opportunity and there's an avenue to fund a lot of these types of programs through the CAP guideline process, and I can go through exactly how that's done, but those are the two main avenues. So you've got your traditional grant programs, and then you've got the community identified programs, and there's opportunities to fund both of those through the CAP funding. We are under some pretty tight timelines. We have some state mandated deadlines that all this funding must be liquidated, which means paid out, projects on the ground and implemented by June of 2025. It may seem like a long way away, but as these things go and as programs get developed, it's a fairly tight timeline. So we can't waste a lot of time, and we got to get these programs up and running. So the process for developing the clean air grant measures, again, and this is exactly what we're engaged in right now. It's a community-driven process to identify, prioritize, and address the sources of air pollution that are important to you within your community. You've developed a list of measures so far, and it's based on community input and the unique characteristics of the Stockton community. What works for you and what is important to you is not going to be the same as what's important to folks in Shafter and Fresno and other areas of the valley. So it's really focused on the Stockton community and what's important to you. Now, what we can do is we can prioritize these measures based on a wide variety of different factors. And these are in no particular order. These are some of the factors that we really need to look at when we're prioritizing these measures. Number one is cost effectiveness, and that's really what's going to get you the biggest bang for your buck. What's going to get you the most emission reductions for every dollar that we spend. Next is exposure reduction. Some of these measures may not actually reduce emissions, but they may reduce residents' exposure to emissions. So that's very important. It's different from emission reductions, but no less important. The availability of potential projects. So, we can't put forth a SERP where we're gonna commit to replacing 1,000 school buses. We all know that there's not 1,000 school buses to replace, so we have to think about the availability of the equipment. Like, I think Ryan touched on that a little bit. And then the willingness of the partners to participate. So we have to have willing partners. All of these are voluntary programs. All of the incentive programs are voluntary programs. So you have to have somebody that's willing to participate. And in a lot of cases, that means put up some of their own money. Very, very few incentive programs that the district operates just traditionally pay for 100% of anything, with some exceptions. So there's generally a buy-in there. So you have to have those willing participants that are willing to put that money in and buy into these types of projects. Timeframe is another really important thing to consider. Can these projects be done within those timeframes that we're talking about, that June 2025 deadline we have to concern ourselves with. So if we've got a project that we know isn't going to be done until 26 or 27, we really have to kind of refocus on what we can do in the shorter term and get those projects done. And then the overall project cost. Unfortunately, money is not unlimited. Everybody has limitations with funding. State funding is very, very tight these days. So, overall project cost has to be a consideration. So the overall allocation of funding for these measures included in the SERP is dependent on multiple factors. Number one, it's the result of your committee's evaluation and prioritization of the individual measures, which we're actually going to go over in just a moment. The demonstrated air quality benefit or exposure reduction. And then all of these have to be, once they're put into the SERP, they have to be approved by the Carb board and the district's governing board, and then implemented after those approvals happen. And then again, we have to be able to identify a reasonable number of projects in each category, or a reasonable expectation that we're going to get that number of projects in each one of these categories to fulfill that item. And again, the expected time frame for completion, which we just talked about. And so we talked last time, everybody wants to know kind of how much there is available and what we're kind of looking at. And what we've seen in the last two SERPs is we back into that number based on what the committee is really interested in. Was there a question there? Okay, sorry, I heard something. And so in Shafter, the incentives portion of the SERP came out to about $36 million. In Fresno, it was about $42 million. And so we're anticipating somewhere in that range, somewhere in that ballpark in Stockton. And we'll go through, as you'll see in the next few slides, you'll kind of see, how that could potentially be broken up. I give some examples and just a place to kind of start thinking about these types of things. So really, based on the surveys and based on the results of those surveys, your committee has done a lot of work to prioritize all of the measures, not just the incentive measures, which I'm focusing on, but all of the measures, be that regulatory or outreach or policy-driven measers. And so you rank those, and we characterize those as 1 to 44 or 1 to 45, whatever it is. And we put those in a table, and Jamie's going to go over a little bit more of that when I'm done. These measures, the incentive measures in particular, could broadly be categorized into 4 following groups. So we've got our heavy duty measures. Those are trucks, heavy duty fueling infrastructure like a natural gas fueling station to support clean trucks, that sort of thing. School bus replacement, locomotive replacement, those sorts of things. And then the next one is transportation sources. Those are going to be like light duty electric vehicles, electric cars and things like that. Vehicle repair, we've got a vehicle repair program that we operate here at the district. So we're thinking about, you know, some targeted vehicle repair activities within the community. Car and bike sharing programs have been suggested as potential CERT measures. And then mechanics training. You know, with all this new technology, we need mechanics that are able to work on these vehicles and repair them. So that's a real important component to all this. So the next general category is really focused on the port. You know, and that's heavy duty port equipment. You've got cranes and yard trucks and things like tugboats and, you know, ships at berth and sort of all of those sources related to the port. And so we kind of categorize those as their own sort of their own group. And then really the community level sources. This is going to be your lawn and garden equipment, residential wood stove replacement, some of the urban greening and sort of the exposure reduction measures that are really at that community level. So based on all of those and those 4 general categories, what we've done is we've put together 4 different tables and kind of we want to go through each one of those tables and kind of get an idea of what a potential CERP emission reduction strategy could look like. And so the first one I want to start with is really the community level measures. And so you'll see here on the very left-hand side is the number, and that's just for us to be able to keep things straight and for the committee to be able to keep things straight. The measure itself, here's a very brief description of the measure. The committee ranking, this is basically, we took all of the information that you did to rank each one of the measures and we turned it into a numerical value. And so here are how every one of these measures sort of fell in line. Here's basically a rough incentive per unit. So this is the cost of a grant to either replace a piece of equipment or do something in that category. So this is just in general about how much these activities or these incentives cost. Cost effectiveness is the next category, which is basically that dollars per ton. How many dollars are you spending for every ton of emission that you're reducing? And that's really kind of the measure that we use to determine the effectiveness of some of these grant programs. Where you see an NA, it means either we don't have enough information to calculate cost effectiveness yet, or it means it might be an exposure reduction where you're not necessarily reducing emissions, but you're reducing exposure. And so that's what the NA would mean in these cases here. And then in red is really just sort of a starting place. So these numbers are just our initial thoughts based on, you know, information that we've received about the numbers of potential units in a community. Your committee ranking factors into this, but it's really just a starting point. You know, we're taking information from the other communities and some of the very similar programs that they've adopted in their communities as a starting place. And this is really where the work is going to be. You know, how do you feel about, you know, replacing 100 wood stoves? Is that too many? Is that too, you know, few? You want to go up or down? You know, that's where the real work is going to be. So in this case, we started with, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each individual measure, but I'd be happy to answer any particular questions. But for instance, vegetative barriers, we put a $500,000, you know, almost a placeholder here. This is how much was, excuse me, this is how much was put into some of the other CERPs where they had a very similar measure. When we know more information and we get into, you know, a little bit more of the specifics about what a vegetative barrier project or an urban greening project might look like in Stockton, you know, those may go up or down. So that's kind of just a project placeholder for those types of measures there. Wood burning devices, the district offers up to $3,000 generally speaking. So, you multiply, the incentive times the number of units, and that kind of gets you this last category here. And so with each of these, we've tried to come up with what we feel is going to be a reasonable number of projects based on the committee's ranking, how strongly you feel about these measures. And then we've assigned dollar amounts to those. And again, this is, for your consideration, this is kind of a jumping off point. Lawn care equipment was ranked, fairly low, so we didn't put a lot of funding into that, for instance. But we could go, up or down from there. Funding for bicycle paths with associated racks, that was fairly high up on the list of incentive measures, and so we did put quite a bit of funding into that particular measure. So that's community level incentive measures. Now, next is the heavy duty incentive measures. This is where your trucks and fueling infrastructure, school bus replacement, locomotive replacement, anything with a heavy duty diesel engine can be either replaced or cleaner options can be purchased. Your rankings were middle of the road for a lot of them, but there were a couple of them that were very highly ranked. And so I think that the dollar amounts, the associated dollar amounts reflect those rankings. Truck replacement, we can offer between $100,000 and $200,000 per vehicle, depending on what they purchase. If they're purchasing what's called a near zero emission, or it's a very clean vehicle, we can offer up to $100,000. If it's a zero emission truck, we can offer up to $200,000. So it depends on the emission level. And so there's a range there based on how many trucks we do. We estimated we could do 50 trucks. And so that would be between 5 and 10 million based on the $100,000 to $200,000 incentive level. Fueling infrastructure, we're estimating essentially one new alternative fueling station within the community. And that would support a lot of these clean trucks. School bus replacement, we actually had a conversation with the transportation director for Stockton Unified, and they had committed, just in our conversation, that they could potentially do up to 14 brand new electric school buses. They're already doing some, and they got a grant from the California Energy Commission, and I think another Carb grant. But they're developing their charging system right now to accommodate up to 25 vehicles. So they've got 11 that they're doing now, so they could say that without any problem, they could probably do another 14. So that's where that number came from. Locomotives, we figure there's locomotives. We know a lot of short line locomotive companies up in the area, and we reasonably think we could probably do at least 3 additional locomotive projects. Rail car switchers, rail car movers and switchers. They're very similar to the locomotives, big heavy duty diesel engines. We figure at a minimum we could probably do at least 3 of those types of projects. And then this is something that was very important to the committee here, was the truck rerouting study. We're actually going through one of these right now in the Fresno community. The Fresno community has allocated about $500,000 in their SERP, and so we figured a similar amount would be reasonable for a truck rerouting study within Stockton. So the next is the Port of Stockton incentive measures, and admittedly, I think we have a little bit more research to do in this area for the most part. We're just starting to have some detailed discussions with the port. But there's 3 measures. One of them is actually a brand new measure that wasn't included in your list, but it will show up. The first one is zero emission, near zero and zero emission heavy duty on and off-road equipment. So these are your big cranes and forklifts and yard trucks and things like that that operate at and around the ports. So we gave a range in terms of the incentive amount per unit, just based on what we're actually doing. And so we have a total funding need, which is a range that reflects that. We think we can do at least 10 units at the port and surrounding the port. with those types of projects. Tugboat replacement, we need to do some more research, admittedly. We've never done a tugboat replacement, but we think it's an eligible category, and it's something that we could absolutely look at doing. So the $1 million here is honestly just a placeholder and something to think about while we're doing this additional research. And same with this brand new measure that was talked about. It's a marine exhaust intake bonnet. It's something when a ship comes in, you can move a device over the top of the exhaust stack that captures the exhaust coming out and scrubs the exhaust coming out of that ship while it's at berth at the Port of Stockton. And so again, that's something that it's fairly new to us, so we need to do a little bit more research. But again, we assign sort of a placeholder value of $1 million there. And then finally, we have our transportation sources. These are, again, cars and bikes and things like that. So electric bike sharing, it's really dependent on what the final project looks like. So this is too wide of a range, really, to assign any real numbers to at this point, and would need a little bit of additional research to sort of fine tune what a project might look like. And so we assign $50,000 in that category just as a place to jump off. Tune in, tune up events, we have a very good idea. Each one of those events that we operate, those are our weekend vehicle repair events where folks can come in and get vouchers for smog related repairs for their vehicles. We operate them all throughout the valley. So the idea would be to host over the next couple of years 2 very, very targeted events targeted at the Stockton area at a cost of $60,000 per event. That $60,000 includes all of the event costs plus all of the costs for all of the vehicle repairs. So we have a pretty good idea of what that costs. Hybrid incentives for hybrid or electric plug-in vehicles. We operate a program that pays about $8,000 for folks to replace their car with a much cleaner car. And so we have a really good idea of what we could do in that area. And so we've assigned about $800,000 to that. And we think we could realistically do about 100 cars in the Stockton area without too much trouble. Charging vehicle incentives for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We actually, again, we operate a program. We could have targeted funding. We could look to install publicly available chargers throughout the Stockton area at a cost, depending on the type of charging system you install. If it's a level 2 or a slower charger, it could be $5,000 versus the high speed level 3 chargers run up to $25,000. So that's the range for that measure there. Mechanics training that we talked about. We partner with community colleges and other educational institutions to develop training materials and training programs to assist mechanics with that sort of training. And then a car sharing program. We've operated a sort of on a pilot basis. We've operated several of these. And so again, this was just understanding that it would be fairly dependent on the type of program and the scale of the program that you wanted to launch within the Stockton area, but it could run up to $1 million for all of the clean vehicles that would be necessary to purchase, and then the associated infrastructure. So with that, that's kind of how we approached it. Again, this is really just sort of a jumping off point. It's food for thought. It gives you kind of an idea of how how we would approach, or how you could approach coming up with your final list of measures and how you want to allocate any potential funding. But this is really for you guys to chew on and look to see go up or down. Do these make sense, or to shift money from one to the other? So again, I'd be happy to answer any questions about this, but I think Jamie's going to provide a little bit more information at this point. But whenever the appropriate time is, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Todd. I'm going to take over, and there have been lots of good questions in the chat, so I encourage folks to continue to do that. Some of those questions I'm going to answer now, and I'm going to do learned how to do this, use my wand. My wand! Can you guys see my screen and my little red dot?
Yeah,
Good.
do you mind zooming in a little bit more, Jamie?
I can, maybe. That may be,
Hopefully that's
yep, that'll work.
maybe.
So as Todd was mentioning, and as has been brought up in the chat, there's this big pot of funding, the around 40 million that we keep talking about, that's under the CAP funding, the Community Air Protection Funding Guidelines. And that's really the things that are expensive things that we're going to go out and have to buy. And they'll probably involve either a partner who's going to take advantage of the grant, another agency who might be involved in a study, maybe some type of a project that might go in a school, something like that. These are the big, $1 million funding amounts. There's this second group of strategies that are still very much priority strategies that will very much be done, but they're not coming out of that $40 million pot. They're going to be funded. They're implementation strategies. We call them implementation because they're funded through a separate pot of money that the district gets to do monitoring, to do these meetings, and the funding on those is a little less defined. But we have, in order to allow you all to do some budgeting, separated those two categories. So we're going to give you 2 worksheets. We're going to email them out tonight or tomorrow morning for you to fill out and comment. We are at the very kind of the beginning stage of this process. We just have some ideas, we've gotten some feedback, and we really want you to begin to understand a little bit more, little more details being given in these worksheets that you're going to have, and also give you an opportunity to kind of crunch the numbers a little bit if you want on the bigger ticket items. We are 100% still investigating new strategies. There's some new strategies that were put forth through the survey that we want you guys to comment on. There are strategies that maybe we've got 70% of what you want, but we don't have 100% of what you want. So there's still lots of opportunities to do that. So of the 2 worksheets that you're going to be given tonight, one is about incentives. And on this side, they're in order of how they were ranked. And again, vegetative barriers and urban greening continues to be very important to this community. Something I want to...
Jamie, can you zoom in a little bit more so perhaps we can read what's on this sheet? So we want to make sure we understand what's on the sheet, and then you'll have to scroll.
Yeah.
Keep zooming. Keep zooming in.
More?
Yeah.
More?
Maybe. I think this is good.
Okay.
This is... Let us know in the chat box.
Better.
Much better?
Better? You guys?
Much better.
Gotcha. So, so as you can see, and I'm just going to scroll down just for a minute. If you want to know what our secret code of numbering means, down here in the bottom you can see. TR just stands for trees. It's just a way for us to kind of be able to group these. So there's not some, it's not incredibly secret, but you can see what things mean. So I'm going to scroll back up here. So you can see how they were ranked. Now, if you're wondering why there are holes over on the implementation side, I'm going to show you that one in just a minute, you'll see how the implementation one that they ranked. They're more driven by staff, driven by collaboration, driven by working with the community. They're not big checks that we're giving out to people. So a couple things that I want to point out is that on this sheet, you can see the cost effectiveness. And as Todd was mentioning, some of them, we don't really know the cost effectiveness yet. It's not quite quantifiable. There's not a, you know, a dollar per ton. And we've said that, no quantifiable cost effectiveness range. If we put vegetative barriers in place, we don't exactly know, because there's not a lot of science on this, the amount of pollution those trees will take out of the air. It's more of a mitigation strategy. However, for some of these, for example, this one right here is heavy duty trucks. These are heavy duty trucks. We know that there is some data about if you take a heavy duty truck and you take a dirty truck and you turn it into a clean truck, there is a cost effectiveness number. The basic thing you need to remember is the lower the number, the cheaper it is. So the bigger bang for your buck. The lower the number, so if I'm out there buying tons and I want to buy 10 tons, if those tons are, I can buy either 1 ton for $10, 1 ton, $10, that's not very good. I want to be able to buy 10 tons for $1. So the lower the dollar amount, the better it is. Then we also have what Todd said, the number of projects we've proposed. These are just, they're just numbers. We are, any section on this spreadsheet that is blue, we want you to go in and play around with. And the blue sections, all the other sections are password protected, but the blue sections, look, I can go in and I'd say, I actually want 2 of these. That's gonna move that budgeted amount up. And if you look down here, it's gonna impact this total number down here. So we hope, and if you don't have Excel, we can send this as a PDF. We can email it to you. We can mail it to you. We'll get this out to you. But we want you to start playing around with these. You may put something in here that says, I hate trees. This should, you know, should be number 30, or number 30 in the prioritization. That's great. Put that on there too. However you want to do it. What we're then going to do is begin to aggregate all this information and see where there are trends. Now, if one person puts down that they hate trees and everyone else is still loving trees, unfortunately, the tree hater will probably not get their strategy put down lower. So we're really going to look for those trends and those similarities between the comments and the dollar amounts that people are putting in here. Another thing that I want to point out, is down at the bottom of this spreadsheet was some of the strategies that were added during that last question in the survey. You know, what about doing X, Y, and Z? Some of them have been incorporated into the strategies that were already proposed, like a focus on the port and crosstown freeway, vegetative barriers. And I will say, I just pulled these verbatim out of the survey, so kind of had to guess a little bit what some of them meant. But we've incorporated them, and if you scroll over, you can see that we've incorporated these into the port strategies and TR number 2. So you can go back up and see, oh yeah, that is in there. We did talk about vegetative barriers at the port or at the crosstown freeway. Sound walls, vegetative barriers, again, where we incorporated them. There's also the type of reduction. Some of them are actual, we are taking emissions that might be coming out of the tailpipe and we're reducing it. We're taking those emissions and we're making them smaller. Some of these strategies are mitigation. There are things that don't actually reduce the amount of pollution, but they make your exposure to that pollution less. That's like school filtration systems. There's enforcement strategies, there's regulatory strategies, and there's outreach strategies. So those are just a few of how we kind of classified them and what that column means. Then down here, we've got 4 strategies that we want to have you guys rank. And I would love for folks to give me more information on them as well. And if I scroll over, you'll be able to see there's a place for you to type in. Oh, yay, type. So you can type in here, but the 4 new ideas that were not incorporated into existing strategies. So these are new ideas that we didn't really know where they would go. They didn't kind of piggyback on something else. Some of the strategies really did piggyback on ideas that we already had. Emission-free zones, someone has brought that up a couple of times. The air quality impact from algae blooms, what would that look like? How would we work on that? Health and safety buffers, what do those look like? What kind of incentive program or implementation program would that look like? And then marine exhaust intake bonnet emission controls. This is something at the port that would go on top of the equipment at the port and would capture the emissions from, I believe, vessels coming in. But all of those are strategies that we need a little more information on. So again, I'm just going to go over these. These are the ones that Todd already discussed. And again, you can move all these around. You can fund them, don't fund them. You can say some of these, you know what, we don't want to put any money towards them. We don't think that we should be spending money on them. There's been questions about, well, what about those programs that the district already spends money on? An example was tune in, tune up. So we do these rotating tune in, tune up events where folks can bring in their vehicles and have them checked. And if they do not pass smog, or if they do not pass the emissions test, they'll get a voucher for their car to be repaired so that they then can get their smog test. It's usually folks who have older vehicles. Usually, I know there's some discussion in the chat about the age of the vehicles, but they're usually vehicles that are about 15 years old, if not older. We make it up to Stockton usually once a year. If we were to do this, we'd make it up there maybe 3 times, and we'd really target it to make sure that this community was aware of it. We'd put additional outreach dollars behind it, and we'd really focus it. So it's not that money, it's not to say that we're going to take what we're already doing and say, oh, this was an incentive strategy, or this was an AB 617 strategy, check, we're done. If you all prioritize it, it's that we're saying, yeah, we already do it, but we only do it at this level. And because you all have prioritized it, we're now doing it at this level. So I hope that makes sense for folks. The next thing I want to show, and I'm going to stop sharing this, and then I'm going to come back to share the next one, are the things that are more what I'm calling implementation. They're the things that you think about them, there's just not a big check being issued to someone. I'm going to share my screen again. I think this is it. Yep. I'm going to turn on my magic wand again. All right. Is that big enough for everyone? Yep.
No, can you zoom in a little?
Yep.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go through these in a little more detail just because Todd didn't touch on them in his presentation, and there aren't that many. So the ones that got the most votes is the ones that were weighted the highest, and we'll continue to do this prioritization exercise. I know some people, we had about 30 people take the survey, some people didn't get to. It was mostly residents, so that was great, but we'll continue to do this kind of honing in process. So it's really kind of, think of it as that, did it score high or low? That's kind of the general idea of this. Outreach did well, and you will see that some of the things that are listed on outreach were direct suggestions from the survey. Videos about air quality, English, Spanish, tag-along, we've actually put that into the potential outreach strategies. So we took some of those suggestions and are beginning to fine-tune them for the outreach strategy. Again, plenty of opportunity for us to continue to fine-tune them. Outreach, both of the top ones were outreach, getting all the schools enrolled in our Healthier Living School program to really get them educated about air quality, doing increased enforcement, changing some inspection frequency to doing it twice a year instead of once a year, reducing exposure to diesel particulate matter through more enforcement of the no idling rules. Scrolling down. The port strategies, again, we need more discussion on that. We are hoping that the port will be coming to one of our next meetings and giving a presentation so that we can better understand some of the issues at the port. I know some of you are very involved in that, and where there might be opportunities, not for giving them money, but just for being involved in processes and identifying ways to better coordinate with the port. Some of these are carbs, and they're ones that have to do with regulations that are at the state level. The frequency of the CARB heavy duty inspection program, that's where their team goes out and actually looks at heavy duty trucks and says, okay, your truck's not compliant, and they basically can get a ticket. So increase the frequency of CARB doing that type of outreach. Conduct expedited facility risks assessment. These are on facilities within the community to go in and kind of do a deep dive. It's an analytical exercise that engineers and staff do, and they really look at the impact that those facilities are having on their community. Another port one, District Reg 8 is basically dust at primarily construction sites, but it's wherever someone might be kicking up dust, looking at enforcing those rules to make sure folks aren't kicking up dust. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. The statewide truck and bus regulation, continuing to implement and looking for ways to strengthen that. Same thing with the transport refrigeration unit program. That's a regulation, continue to implement and strengthen that. That's at the CARB level. Looking at district regulations to determine where additional reductions are possible. And while our regulations, as you all learned, if you were at the webinar that we did a month ago, whenever that was, our regulations are applied district-wide, and there are already several regulations that are going through that process because of the Shafter and Fresno steering committees prioritizing it. And then also AB 617 actually includes some requirements for basically looking at all your rules and saying, is there a better way to do them? Is there a way you can get additional emission reductions? The CARB's Consumer Products Regulatory Program is on here. Reducing illegal burning both through education, which is this one, and right below it is through enforcement. So that's kind of a 1-2. They kind of go in tandem, but you all did prioritize educating people before going out and giving them a ticket. A couple more port ones. The CARB in-use off-road diesel fuel fleets rule, continuing to implement and strengthen that. Enhanced enforcement of residential wood burning. Again, wasn't a top priority, I think, for some of these, especially for the ones that are public facing. There has been a trend that this committee is more interested that when it comes to the public, and I think someone even put it into one of the survey results, the carrot with the public is where you should go first, and then look at enforcement and fines and that type of thing. This cooking one is looking at like the taquerias that are on the street that are producing smoke, especially in the El Dorado area. And then LU1 is just looking at how we can work with the COG, the city, the county on things just like what Grant was talking about with the TCC. And then this 42 was to basically look at a way to train individuals, be it a gas station owner, an operator, a member of the public, to go out and do self-inspections at gas stations. And that did not have a lot of support, but something we can still do. So, and again, here you can see some of the additional strategies, suggestions that were made. Alternative cooking options for homeless. We actually included that one up in, let me look, I can't remember off the top of my head, RB2. So when we're looking at educating folks about, I went past it. Sorry, I know I'm going too fast. About illegal burning, such as burning trash and cooking fires. We're going to look and see if there's ways that we can educate the homeless community, maybe work with the nonprofits who work with the homeless community to see if there's alternatives to the cooking fires that are currently being used. So again, with this one, it doesn't have dollar amounts because it's not big checks that are being written to people. It's coordinating with folks. It is using district staff. It's using other organization staff to make sure that these things are getting done. And within, as we develop these further, these strategies may have more specific benchmarks. An example for the outreach ones is that we're going to do, maybe 3 workshops a year with the public to educate them on certain things. So those are metrics that are coming. But again, this blue section, you guys can type away and enter. You'll be emailed this. Let me see. So there, I know has been a big discussion about natural gas and wanting to go straight to electric in the chat. And I don't know if folks have commented on it, but our goal is always to go to electric when electric is available. In some cases, that technology does not exist. So one of the things that you have to think about as a steering committee is, do you want to not put cleaning up what might be a dirty something, a heavy duty truck? You can make it, right now you could take it from dirty to cleaner, and that might be something that can happen in the next year, or you might have to wait. Depending on who you talk to, the horizon for heavy duty trucks is maybe 5 to 10 years out of them being widely commercially available. Do you want to wait and see if there might be funding post AB 617 to clean up those trucks? So that's kind of one of the things that you all are going to have to consider. If there's an electric alternative, we 100%, that's going to be our priority to fund the electric alternative. But in some cases, it just doesn't work. The other good example I use is electric vehicles. If you're someone who needs to drive, more than maybe about 150 miles on a charge, maybe you have a lot of kids, maybe you're taking people all around, you might need a plug-in electric hybrid, like a plug-in Prius. You might not be able to do the all electric vehicle. So that's one of the things for you all to kind of consider as you're going through this. Are there instances when that near zero technology does make sense if the all electric option isn't available? So just something to think about. We will, after tonight, send out, as I said, these 2 spreadsheets. We want you guys to put in your information, and then we're going to need some time to kind of pull it all together and be able to communicate it back to you. And we're thinking about trying to have another meeting kind of near the end of October. And so we're going to send this to you tonight, and we're hoping by the end of next week, we might be able to get these back from you. So we'll discuss that a little bit more, but I am open to answering any questions. Todd's open to answering questions. I'm going to allow that to happen, and we'll look to see if there are any additional questions in the chat as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jamie. There are a lot of questions in the chat. I know some of them have been answered, but what Jamie shared, again, the goal is to present survey results and share the survey results with you tonight. What I'm seeing from the chat box is that you would like, to discuss these measures in more detail and in more collaborative environment. And that's where Jamie is mentioning additional meeting where you will do some work on your own, and we reconvene as the committee members later in October and have this detailed conversations about the strategies. Also in the chat box, I'm seeing suggestions to the need to understand what's already done and what's funded, the need to learn from each other, from the committee members. Yes, we are in self-isolation environment and it's tough, but again, providing this additional space for this committee to convene after you do some individual work on your own and having this deeper dive conversations about each strategy. Again, the date, Jamie, did you mention the date of the meeting?
The potential date that we're looking at is October 21st, but if that doesn't, I mean, we're open. We're open to suggestions. We just want to be able to give you over a week to look at these spreadsheets. We want to then be able to pull it together so that we can have something else to show you on the at that October meeting, and then have time between that second October meeting and the November meeting to take additional feedback.
Okay. So October 21st, if you cannot, absolutely cannot attend October 21st meeting, please type it in the chat box and we'll see how many people absolutely cannot attend this meeting, and then we'll brainstorm an alternative date. So I want to make sure this committee is clear on the next steps with the spreadsheet. What are you doing? What are you filling out? How you're playing with numbers? What additional comments you're providing on the spreadsheet? Just, you know, keep sharing your thoughts, your knowledge, what needs to be done. So let's take several verbal questions for Jamie to clarify things on the spreadsheet, or to clarify what are you doing between now and, let's say, end of next week. And I know there's a lot in the chat box. And okay, I see the hand from Jonathan. Oh.
Hey, what's up, guys? I just want to make sure, I know it was a lot of stuff for everyone. I want to make sure, is everyone feeling comfortable? Do they need more time for looking over these SERPs? You know, and I wanted to also ask from Carb, if Carb staff could please reply, are we able to extend the deadline for trying to solve this SERP? That in the past, it was supposed to be in December. Are we able to extend it to by January or February?
Thanks, Jonathan. And I don't know if Carb is ready to chime in right now or not, but definitely we're still working on SERP. This is just draft strategies, as Jamie mentioned today. We're still introducing.
Carb's here.
Yeah, I'm here, Hannah. This is Karen Buckley, and it is a statutory deadline in December. But if the district and the steering committee determines what their next steps need to be, we do have a letter that discusses options. So while I can't specifically just wave away a deadline from the legislature, we have something that we're looking into for people to use. So I know that's not as clean an answer as you would like, Jonathan, but that's what I could do for you. This came up in San Diego, so we're working with them. So it's based on what they're going to be doing as well. But you guys are actually a lot closer than you realize to being complete. So if you can make the deadline, it would be great. But I leave that to the group to determine.
So maybe if I can share some kind of advice and what we've learned going through this process with South Central Fresno and Shafter. I definitely don't want the committee to feel like the SERP that gets taken to the governing board, that's it. That's the last opportunity that the steering committee ever has to provide input on the measures that are included in the SERP, the amounts that are applied to different measures. That's not the case. I think that the big thing is, you know, we're spending this time, we're putting together, you know, great ideas and suggestions for measures. And when we take that, those are the ones that you know, the community has prioritized at the time. It has commitments, you know, from the district and other agencies to move forward with trying to implement those measures as quickly as possible over like a 5-year period of time. That's really what that's about. And so I don't want the committee to think like, you know, we're stuck on this one, like we don't necessarily know on vegetative barriers, like, you know, how many linear feet of trees we want and what the dollar amount for that measure is going to be. And that is something that, you know, holds up the ability to take that SERP to and look to get it approved. That because we're going to have 5 years to you know, complete that and that measure and get it right in the eyes of the steering committee. So I think those are, you know, important things for the steering committee to fully understand, that this is not a document that has no ability to be changed. They do still have the you know, the district, and working with the steering committee will still have that ability even moving forward. So I mean, the SERP, you know, when we eventually take it, yes, I mean, we want to try to have it, you know, captured everything that the steering committee, you know, when we take it, includes the things that the steering committee wants to be a part of the SERP. But at the same time, with the understanding that there's still going to be ability to make changes later on if the steering committee is supportive of that. So, you know, kind of like what Karen was saying, and this isn't my pitch to be like, you know, it needs to be done by any date. It's just more wanting the committee to fully understand. I agree with Karen that I think we're further along than you know, pretty much any other district at this point with what we're doing. I think with several more meetings, the committee may feel more comfortable with where they're at. And you know, if at a certain point it definitely looks like we're not going to be able to get it done by a certain date, I think that's when us and Carb and the steering committee need to have a conversation about possibly extending dates.
And just to add one more thing to the mix, for spending some of these incentive dollars, we do have time limits on spending some of these incentive dollars. So just something to think about to add to the mix. The other thing I just want to answer real quick, because I think it's a good question. The question Gloria has about laws going into effect for in the future for the entire state. There's been a lot of talk recently about the omnibus going all electric, and maybe I don't know if Carb's ready to talk about that, but maybe at the next meeting they can talk a little bit about what that means. Will we all have to be driving electric cars in the next 15 years? Is it that we'll just be buying new all electric, you know, some of that discussion about what state legislation is coming down the road, I think might be another just good, you know, maybe 5-10 minute update, so you can understand kind of why some of this stuff may still be stuff that you all want to incentivize and some of it may not be.
Jamie, this is Scott. I'm happy to give that 5 minutes in the next meeting. I'm not quite prepared to address it off the top of my hat, but yeah, I know that it is kind of, most of these regulations are kind of like a phased in type of an approach. So I certainly can put together some quick bullets for that for the next meeting.
Great, Scott. And I know there's just, it seems like the governor's making, every day he comes up with something new. So we want to make sure we're keeping it up to speed on it. I appreciate Gloria for pointing that out. I think it was, is that who it was? I think it was, yeah, Gloria.
Great, thank you. Again, we want to make sure that the committee members understand how to use the tracker and what are the next steps. And please, in the comment box in those proposed strategies trackers, provide additional comments. If you know something is going on in the area, some organizations are working on X, put that in the comment box so we can start collecting this community wisdom. And again, to provide more opportunities to discuss the strategies, we still have time. We'll set another meeting in October. And if you haven't had a chance to type in the chat box that October 21 absolutely does not work for you, please do that now.
Hannah,
okay,
maybe we can do a couple things just to make sure that the steering committee is supportive of having another meeting. Maybe we could send out a doodle poll with some dates and make sure that everybody's okay with having that.
Although we've got lots of positives in the chat already. So.
And also, when you're all ready, if you'd like, we can also show on the screen just a summary of some of what's been discussed tonight so that it's all in writing for you to reflect a few of the key takeaways based on the presentation, which were great, but there's a lot of information presented. So we want to make sure everybody knows what's happening next, where to weigh in, and what you need to do and by when.
Okay. Catherine, you are leading us into the next segment with your question about air monitoring plan.
I think Crystal. I think she has a crystal ball. She knew it was coming up.
I know she's reading. She's reading my thoughts, and with that, I'm gonna pass it to John. The leadership team asked to provide an update on air monitoring plan, and as Erica mentioned at the beginning, if any of the committee members would like to be on the leadership team, type it in the chat box. Let us know.
All right. Thank you, Hannah, and thanks, Catherine, for that question. Yeah, great timing, because I did want to update the committee here on where we are with that. Give you some updates on air monitoring for Stockton. So just going back a few months, just a reminder. In July, we had a great time together, a great session going over an exercise of air monitoring, where we got a lot of great feedback from all of you on locations of where you think it should happen, different pollutants that should be monitored, different sources of concern. In August, a month later, we had a short discussion where we showed some of the results of that exercise, showing where the areas of most interest were on a map and what pollutants should be measured. In September, we had a great presentation from Glenn Bell and Gloria, the youth advocates, on their thoughts and perspectives on air monitoring in Stockton. So based on all that feedback and those exercises, we have drafted what's called the Stockton Community Air Monitoring Plan document, which will describe all of those recommendations, where we have a map showing where we're proposing to monitor, which is similar to what we showed at the August meeting, what pollutants will be monitored where, the type of equipment, and some more details. So what we'd like to do next is, now that we have that document drafted based on the feedback and recommendations from the committee here over the past few months, we would like to share that with the committee here, a draft of that, to get your feedback, comments, thoughts on it. And with your support after that, we would then move next to start getting locations secured for monitoring equipment, getting lease agreements in place in these different areas, so that as air monitoring equipment becomes available soon, we can get that deployed quickly and start collecting a lot of valuable air monitoring data for the Stockton community. So that is where we're at with the plan, and we should be getting that out to you shortly for your review and comment. Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, John. One or two questions for John. I know we're getting closer to 7 p.m., but just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Okay, I see no questions for John at the moment, but I do see a lot of questions about the leadership team, and I wonder if Jamie or Ryan just want to give a brief details what the leadership team is, and as you're listening to that, if you would like to volunteer and co-host the next meeting, type your name in the chat box.
So anyone who wants to be on the leadership team, just raise your hand. You can be on the leadership team. All we do is periodically we kind of do a check-in to make sure that what we're agendizing and the priorities that we're putting on the agenda, not the details of, you know, the SERP or any of that type of stuff. It's more about logistics of the meetings, that you are a part of that. We usually meet a few days before the regularly scheduled community steering committee meeting. It is usually during the day, and it's about for an hour. Sometimes we'll just get you guys together to like pick your brain about stuff too. So that's kind of the leadership team. Kind of the logistical leadership team would probably be a better name for it. And anyone who wants to be on it can be on it.
Well, I see Douglas is raising his hand. And Will, is that a hand to be on the leadership team, or you have a question?
Yeah, I was kind of concerned about when you talk about leadership team, is this going to be another, you know, is this committee going to last, what, for 1 year from a point renewing a new committee, is this gonna be, how long is this committee gonna go to, from 1 year to 2 year? That's what I was asking that question. And then if you're gonna select other committee of leadership of other committee, a subcommittee, maybe, I don't know. So that's what the question is.
Yeah. Douglas, you all are on this committee for the rest of your lives. No, it's really.
Oh, no.
It's really up.
I hope he lives much longer than this committee will be around. So.
It's really up to you all, but we definitely anticipate that we have probably at least a year or two of meetings after the SERP is approved. So we think that probably another couple of years after this year, just to make sure that the implementation's going the way that we expect it to. And the SERP is a living document, and we may not need to change things along the way. So with that regard, you can jump on the leadership team and jump off the leadership team. You can be invited to leadership team meetings and never make them. You can be invited to leadership team meetings and then still call us and say, I want to chat with you offline. We just needed a little group of folks that were willing to meet, and it, like I said, it usually is during the day, and it's usually not at a set time. Zong usually sends out a poll ahead of time to find out when folks can meet. We just wanted to be able to chat about meeting logistics with some members of the group.
And to solicit advice. I mean, this is obviously Zoom adds another level of complexity. And for example, we met with several of the steering committee members and yesterday and kind of talked about how we would share information today. Got feedback from them. Definitely want to thank everybody. I don't want to miss anybody, so that was on that call yesterday. But it was Mary, Jonathan, Dylan. I'm gonna leave off. Was it Mariah? Were you there too? And
that was a bad decision to start listing people because it varies.
I know I should have learned. Someone else just did that recently, and they forgot someone as well. So I apologize. But it's really, we're trying to make these meetings as productive as possible. At the same time, respecting and understanding everybody's time is precious and valuable and can be used in a whole host of ways. And so to whoever is interested in participating, it is a completely open opportunity for anybody that wants to be a part of that. We welcome them. But at the same time, we understand if people have other commitments and can't make it, that's okay too.
And it is just about this community steering committee and what you guys kind of, when what's on the agenda and, how we do certain things.
Yeah, I did want to touch on something, what Doug talked about. So just for example, in South Central Fresno and in Chapter, we're still meeting with them monthly. They're the year one communities. There's a lot of issues that we're still working through. There's a lot of need to continue to have routine meetings, whereas other steering committees in other districts are meeting quarterly right now, and it's really just giving updates on where they're at. I think if you kind of look at the SERPs that they developed are not as comprehensive. A lot of the incentive measures that they focused on were ones that were already developed at the state level. And so basically on day one, once that SERP was approved, they just continued to fund projects. They probably did additional outreach and trying to get more people in to take advantage of those incentives, but it was basically just those same incentive programs are already existing. Whereas in South Central Fresno and Shafter, I would say the majority of the measures that were identified don't fall in that category and have to get approval through Carb. There was a lot more measures that kind of fall outside of the box of incentives that require collaboration with cities, counties, and other types of agencies and organizations in order to move those forward. So there's just a lot more collaboration that's being necessitated in those. And so depending on the measures that come out of Stockton, after a SERP is adopted, we're going to talk to the steering committee and find out how often the steering committee wants to meet and how often they feel it's important to meet. And we'll base on how often we meet on that information.
Thank you, Ryan, for clarifying. It looks like we have a lot of interest in the chat. Okay, we're at 7 o'clock. Let's see if I can set up the records for wrapping up this meeting like we did at the beginning for the housekeeping items. I do want to see if Regina is still with us and if she wants to do any final comments, thoughts, reflections.
And actually, while we have her, I'm going to put up on the screen a summary of the SERP discussion just to make sure everybody understands what's next and where we are going. I see Regina is still online, but I don't see her unmuted yet. So Regina, feel free to unmute when you need to. And let me just show you some of these notes. And these are reflecting some key takeaways from the discussion today. Just a reminder of some of the things. There was a lot of information shared and all of it's really important. And I know there's still probably a little anxiety around this big project you've all got to get done, which is the SERP. There's a couple key things to remember. The Air District's going to share 2 worksheets with all of the CSC members later this week. They can email it to you, or they can mail the Excel spreadsheet, or they can give you a PDF if Excel doesn't work for you. These worksheets, if you get them in Excel, they can be edited. You can add notes, you can change amounts, and then the budget's going to change automatically at the bottom when you change those quantities. The spreadsheets reflect on the left-hand side that rank is based on the measures that the committee provided feedback on in the survey from last month and this month. So this is based on committee feedback, and I think they said something around 30+ people, mostly residents, responded. We are looking at scheduling an additional working meeting just for this SERP and just to talk about these spreadsheets in late October, where the CSC can talk as a group, share ideas, and explain maybe your reasoning for your prioritization and talk through this. There will be a poll sent out to see if the date of October 21st works for everyone or for most of you. And if it doesn't, they'll figure something out to find a time that is most amenable to everyone's schedule. And really importantly, there is still plenty of time to work on the SERP. The goal is to make sure that this committee feels comfortable with the approach and the progress that you're making. So if additional time is needed after December to complete this beyond the deadline, Carb might be able to help with an extension. But this CSC is moving forward really well, and you're actually making really good progress compared to where a lot of other communities have been at this time in their development. So don't fret. Take some time to review those spreadsheets and those worksheets and come to the next meeting with questions or some notes, some scribble, and the Air District is there to help.
Thanks, Erica, for the recap. And since we have you unmuted, do you want to provide just a brief update on the stipends?
Absolutely. The stipend program is up and running. We're so excited. You should have received, depending on when you signed up, maybe 2 checks. And we are continuing to make adjustments to that program and to add people to the program. It's not too late to sign up. You can sign up anytime. We have a lot of members from Stockton. So thank you for that. As you recall, the checks go out once a month. And so you'll get a check for this meeting if you've signed up by the end of the month, early next month at the latest. And usually we try and pay within 30 days of the meeting. So that should be what you look for. Again, reach out to ILG and we are happy to make adjustments to your mailing address or your name even if anything has not shown up the way that you would like. Another update that the Air District gave recently is that they are going to be updating the CSC roster online to include your member affiliations and maybe your emails. So if steering committee members do not want their email online, please let Zong know as soon as possible. I think the Air District sent an email to people last week about this, and she's going to send a reminder out, but it is important to know that as CSC members, your information might be public if you don't opt out of that. So please let the Air District know specifically about that. They also provide us with information. Yeah.
I hate to interrupt. Your flow is fantastic. I'm always amazing. But maybe we can include that in the doodle poll, just a yes or no, whether or not we should just have emails. Really, it was just about a tool for people to be able to get in contact with their fellow steering committee members. But I mean, if the majority of the committee does not want that and doesn't see it as being a useful tool, maybe we can just not include that in that online posting.
That makes perfect sense, to look for that information from the Air District later. Any stipend questions you have, I'm happy to stay on the line a little longer and answer them as always, but so far it's going pretty well. And even individual questions, shoot us an email. We answer them as quickly as we can. And hopefully you guys are happy with the checks that are coming through. And if you haven't gotten one, but you think you signed up, just reach out. Thank you.
Okay. Catherine and Naomi volunteered to be our community co-host next time. We'll probably do one person in November and one person in December. Meanwhile, I want to circle back to Regina for any final thoughts before we adjourn this meeting to our community co-host. Okay. All right. So Regina, I think we're good. Okay, the reminder, check your inbox, your emails, what is coming into your inbox email, doodle polls, spreadsheets. Heather, do we have any comments from the public on the Facebook or via email?
We are good.
Okay, good. Okay, so the November meeting is going to be on November 4th on Wednesday. And again, look out for the doodle poll for another meeting in October. With that, I would like to thank everyone for participating and for taking your time to attend this meeting today. We're a little bit over time. Apologies. This meeting is officially adjourned. We're going to stop recording on Facebook and we're going to stop recording this meeting. But as I mentioned,